Yeah, and you have those nutrient sensors actually along your intestine that will sense that there are nutrients in food and relay that to your brain. So we even have, they found that you have glucose sensors in your stomach, and there's specific receptors that will actually increase the levels of, dopamine and rewarding chemicals in your brain. But this actually is at the level of the gut.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 152 of the SuperSetYourLife.com podcast, your weekly dose of entertainment, education, and inspiration to fuel your life inside and beyond the gym. We are joined today by Calvin Scheller. He is a 17-year-old NASM certified online physique and nutrition coach, blogger, podcaster, and major carnivore success story. At 16, he had to get on testosterone because of hormone imbalances caused by being vegan. If your health is a wreck, I'm sure that he will give you some hope. Proverbs 27:17 teaches iron sharpens iron and one man sharpens another. Conversations with other coaches like Calvin keep me learning and growing. Calvin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. I love all the content you've been producing, so I'm kind of glad to be here.
Oh, I appreciate it a lot, bro. So what caused you to go vegan in the first place?
Yeah, so um, I've always been, not always, but around the age of 13 or 14, I picked up podcasts, and I really fell in love with just listening to podcasts. And unfortunately, I don't think I got the right podcast right off the bat. So I was always interested in sports, so then I got a little bit interested in nutrition. And I was actually at that point, um, I was pretty overweight. I wasn't, morbidly obese, but I was definitely in the obese category. I think I was a bit under 5 foot, and I was probably around 140 pounds ish. So I was a larger kid, and I really wanted to lose weight. So I decided to get on, or just to search up different health podcasts and on YouTube. And unfortunately, the first podcast that I found was, I hate to say his name. I'm not saying it was, this guy intentionally, but I found Michael Greger's podcast, which is a pretty, pretty popular vegan who is all about just eating basically nothing but vegetables. And so I decided to do that. And at the same time, I learned a little bit about fasting. And again, all this information is great for someone who needs to improve their health. They can, for a period of time, while I don't really agree with the vegan stance, for a period of time, it can be helpful for someone who is much older than I was and probably in a much worse state of health. But for me, it turned me into basically a lot of fasting and a lot of basically trying to find the least calorically dense foods possible. So basically, my days consisted of green leafy salads. That was about it. That I think the sweetest thing I was eating was a carrot. Like it
Wow.
was just it was just and I, in the back of my mind, I was like, this is exactly what they're telling me to do. So I stuck with it, even though all of the again, looking back at it, I can see all of the terrible digestive symptoms I had. At the time, I actually started to, so I was eating so many carrots, I started to get an orange tint to my skin.
I've heard that can
Because,
actually happen.
yeah, and is likely because I wasn't even converting all the inactive vitamin A in the carrots, so it was kind of building up subcutaneously. Um, so but I kept going and I lost a lot of weight. And I think one of the reasons I stuck with it so long may have actually just been at that, like those few years are kind of a blur to me now. And I think it sounds crazy, but I think the nutrient deficiencies that I was likely developing and just the lack of nutrition was probably doing a lot to my mental health that I can't even, again, like I can't even remember anymore. So the period between 14 and 15 is kind of a blur. I can't remember why I continued doing what I was doing or quite honestly, I'm not sure if I remember the whole story correctly.
Bro,
But
okay, so
I
I'm laughing because I can relate to you. The couple times
yeah.
that my testosterone has been tanked has been on bodybuilding competitions on a high carb diet, and my fats were low, so I was getting all my energy from carbs and wasn't taking my hormones into consideration because I didn't know enough. And I was just like you, and I was just listening to every podcast and every YouTube video, and just going, okay, if they say it with confidence, they probably know what they're talking about. And I didn't do my own research like you did. And I can't remember anybody's names that I met before and after those shows, bro. That's how out I was from those shows. So since then, going to more meat based shows, obviously that has changed. My testosterone never really tanked the way that it did the first time. But anyway, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to say that I know exactly how that feels.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it. Yeah, my testosterone, I will say, so I was 15 at the time, and when I got the test back, it was undetectable. So they have a reference range between 5 nanograms per deciliter, and I think the top of the reference range was 1,000. And that is typically like if the detectable level, and mine was under the 5 nanograms per deciliter. So technically, it most likely meant that I literally was not producing any testosterone whatsoever. Um, you know,
You're
it
kidding
because
me. I've never
no, some
I've never heard of it being that low. That's outrageous. Your free
yeah.
test as like at your age should be like uh what, like over 1,000, right?
At that age, so going through puberty, it should have been extremely high.
Yeah.
At that point in time, there's an increase in testosterone production to facilitate all of that. So at that point, I should have been probably in the thousands, or at least at the very high end of the hundreds. And then for someone who's diagnosed for TRT replacement is typically below 250, and anyone that's been at 250 knows that doesn't feel quite too well. But it was a little odd. At first I couldn't even interpret the blood work because it
Jeez.
was, a less than symbol and 5, and I was just so confused. And I realized that talking to my doctor, they couldn't detect anything on the blood test. And then we got it tested again because I was very skeptical of that because I'd never heard of that before. And we got it tested again, and I think I was in maybe the 20s. So it definitely was correct, unfortunately. But so
Wow.
I
Yeah,
had to,
because mine got as low as 80,
yeah,
and I felt like absolute garbage. And if you were lower than that, my word.
yeah, and I had to at that point get on. Well, I think I wish I never got on testosterone replacement. So obviously it was an endocrinologist, so his first thought is put him on some sort of hormone replacement. And
Yeah, they're doctors. That's what
uh,
they're supposed to do, right?
yeah, and unfortunately, it while it has so many implications in endocrinology, most endocrinologists don't actually ever even ask about nutrition. So I was never even asked about what I was doing in the kitchen. Um, so at that point, I got directly on testosterone replacement therapy. And looking back on it, I am extremely upset about that because I definitely could have made the positive changes that I needed to. Because I think within the next few months, I actually began learning about the entire process and all of the things that I was doing wrong. And I changed it up within a few months. Started feeling much better, but I was still on this testosterone replacement. So unfortunately, once I got on, the likelihood that I'll be able to get off is very minimal because, especially correlating and corresponding with me hitting puberty, I likely just completely shut down my entire endogenous production. So it's likely that I'll end up on testosterone for a good period of time. And my goal is to work with throughout the next few years to find out a way to get off of it. Oh wow. Sorry about that. To find out a way to get off testosterone. But we'll see if that's a logistical thing. And unfortunately, because I'm so young, there's a peak dosage that they'll give young kids, and that's about 100 milligrams every 2 weeks. So I'm taking 50 milligrams a week at this point. So unfortunately, that's only keeping my testosterone around between 300 and 400, and they won't go any higher, which I understand is kind of a legal issue. But so right now I'm kind of sitting at that 300-400 range. So it's for better, it's much better than sitting at zero, but I'm still kind of suffering the consequences of kind of the bad decisions I made when I was younger.
Have you looked into anything PCT wise?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, at this point, I don't think the endocrinologists in my area are the best to talk to about that. But also, so with everything that occurred, the timing that it occurred was during puberty. So there's a chance, I'm not quite sure, so we'll have to find out soon. I'm still taking the testosterone at this point, and if if possible, I'll have to talk to some family members to see what, you know, and the actual doctor in order to try and stop and, return natural production. But there's a chance that because it all occurred during, the time that I was hitting puberty, something may not have developed fully or correctly. So stopping the exogenous testosterone may just have some negative implications there. So it'll be something that I'll actually have to get continuous blood work done while I'm stopping the testosterone just to make sure that, my follicle stimulating hormone and my luteinizing hormone, all of those things are functioning as they should be.
And you'll probably just like titrate your dosage down really, really carefully. And then if anything looks wacky, bump it back up kind of as needed, huh?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it takes the drive to get blood work is about 45 minutes. So while I would like to, if I can, get as much blood work done during that period of time just to monitor things. But
Mhm.
it definitely is a period of time that once I'm out of high school will be much more easy. Sorry, much easier. So I'm just kind of waiting to graduate this June, and then that process, at least during the summer, having a little bit more time will make it much easier to get all the blood work that I'm looking for.
Yeah, yeah, and then I guess that moves kind of where we're going with this conversation. But I'm sure that your diet is structured in a way to completely optimize your body's production of your own natural testosterone, and so that hopefully that just kind of wakes everything back, wakes your boys back up again, and then gets everything working properly before you even think about get getting off of that dosage, because that's probably just like keeping you alive right now. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, currently I wouldn't say I'm a strict carnivore technically. So I definitely add in, I mean, it's not crazy. It's a lot of actually like citrus vegetables, citrus fruit, like lemons, limes, and some oranges. But other than that, it's a lot of eggs, specifically egg yolks, obviously. Those are like the first thing that I added back in. That and actually liver. Um, those are the first things that I added back in, and it's almost night and day difference. Like I
I
could
feel like
not obvious. Yeah,
so I was gonna say I feel like everybody when they start the carnivore diet they think they have to eat liver like right away, but
yeah.
it's good. It's not essential, but I like it personally. Do you do it raw or do you cook it?
I got lucky, so I actually really like liver. So I cook liver just to make sure. So I'm buying everything from Walmart. So I just cook
Yeah.
it just to make sure because I don't know how trustable everything is. So I definitely am not converting to raw carnivore or anything like that. At least not from the foods I'm getting from Walmart. So
Yeah.
but I do a ton of eggs and I cook liver, which again, I got lucky. My taste buds really like it. So a lot of people are completely grossed out by it. But I really enjoy it. So it's not too crazy of a thing. So every day, at least for my diet, it's really kind of always structured around, I have eggs every day just because there's so much nutrients packed in them. And
Sure.
really the risk of overdosing on anything in an egg is very, very minimal just because all of the nutrients in an egg are pretty even and pretty like there's no, especially for liver, like if you're eating lots of liver you run the risk technically of something going on with your vitamin A status.
Vitamin A, yeah, that's
Or
good.
but really with eggs there's not really anything that, I'd be too worried about. So I definitely structure my diet around eggs, and then I just add in other proteins as I find fit. So, chicken, steak, other things like that. And then
That's brilliant.
I also really, I also really enjoy. So I make my own gelatin actually. So I just buy unflavored gelatin, and some people may not like it for it, but I use just a very small amount of stevia, so it ends up tasting like a vanilla gelatin. So I love to use
Oh,
that
yum.
just as a way to, especially before bed with the glycine content of it. It definitely, I've noticed the difference between eating that and not eating that on my sleep. Not that I have poor sleep without it, but that it definitely benefits my sleep a little bit, and that's my
Gelatin does?
presumption. Yeah, so my presumption
Really?
is the glycine in it is um that's why someone would take magnesium glycinate before bed to improve sleep.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you the exact neurochemistry off the top of my head, but that glycine itself is actually a neurotransmitter that can help with inhibition. So it's kind of like just a relaxing chemical, if that makes any sense. So the
Yeah.
glycine content in there is definitely helpful, I think.
Wow. That's brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I've been looking at. I've been taking a real close look at my own magnesium supplementation, and um, pretty much across the board, all types of meats I'm finding are pretty high in magnesium. In particular, just straight up steak, even more so than liver and other organ meats like heart.
Yeah, and we're finding a lot more of the data is saying that because of the soil, that a lot of the plants aren't really um, that high in magnesium anymore, just because of the way that we're farming things. So the all the plants that are supposed to be very high in magnesium end up being not so high. So um, a lot of the times that's where people fall victim to having to supplement with magnesium, just because they think they're hitting their magnesium targets, but it really is dependent on like the soil that a plant grows in, how much magnesium is in it, because obviously you can't absorb a nutrient that's not present in the soil. So, um, and again, with just the way that we've been farming things, it's not always the healthiest practice. So a lot of times the soil just isn't that abundant in magnesium anymore.
Hmm. And then you got to factor in what kind of phytic acid or oxalate content is in that plant that you're eating in the first place too, that might have more magnesium. And then is that adding magnesium, or is that really just taking it away because it's coating it up because it's toxic and so that it can pass through your system? Best case scenario or worst case scenario, end up with a kidney stone, right?
Absolutely. I don't know if you ever seen a study with phytates and zinc where they gave the same amount of oysters. So I think it was like 120 grams of oysters. And then they gave it alongside just a flour tortilla. And they could actually measure the zinc absorption. And the flour tortilla literally turned the zinc absorption to zero. But so the group that just got the oysters had just pretty normal zinc absorption. But when they just all they had to do was eat the oysters with the tortilla, and the phytates in the tortilla just completely stopped all of their zinc absorption.
No way. That's incredible.
I might have to send that to you to put in the just a link. So I'd love to people for people to read that study. That one was I was writing an essay on like the carnivore diet itself, and that was one of the most interesting ones that I found.
Dude, I wish that I knew this kind of stuff when I was your age, man. It took me forever to figure this out, and it was all trial and error. But just like you, I think you just figured it out way quicker than I did.
Yeah, I wish I didn't have the brief error period, but that really sparked the entire, you know, luckily I think I started my education while I was in school, and I've always been really good in school, and I've always gotten my work done really quickly. So I've just always had a copious amount of time just to finish an assignment, and I'm not one of the kids that really likes to get on my phone. I kind of get right on PubMed a lot of times, just
Yeah.
looking through all that stuff and then listening to podcasts like yours and other people who are providing a bunch of insight. Like I think I have playlists that are all like college lectures that I just throw on every once in a while once I finish with my work. So I think I have a an odd passion for just learning. So it's always, luckily, it's a fun process. It's not something that I have to force.
You're like me. Yeah. If I'm not learning or doing something creative, I'm dying inside. It's what keeps me going. Good for you, man.
Yeah, actually, I just thought of this. I want to come back to that testosterone topic we were talking about,
Yeah.
just because. So I recorded a podcast on testosterone today, and after doing a lot of the research, I think I might actually have kind of uncovered the reason why. Not only is low testosterone correlated with like a poorer cognitive function, but also kind of that correlation between testosterone and anger. So it appears that really what testosterone does is it binds to the androgen receptor, and
Mhm.
this androgen receptor sits inside of the cell and will bind to the nucleus, or bind to the DNA inside of the nucleus. So all it really does is it increases protein synthesis. Um, so whatever type of cell that it is in will increase the proteins that are functional for the cell. So there are definitely androgen receptors in the brain on different neurons. So it the way that the neurons communicate is through the receptor, and those are made of proteins. And then to actually create the neurotransmitter, you need a bunch of different enzymes that are made out of proteins in order to create it. And it really seems that testosterone not having this effect on the brain is simply just reducing the expression of all these receptors. So it's almost like your neurons aren't communicating as strongly. Um, so it's almost like a mild form of like dementia or Alzheimer's, where you're just not communicating as well. And it's simply because you have less receptors to actually communicate. And one of the big ones they found was dopamine. So they actually did a gonadectomy on a child, unfortunately, and they saw that their dopamine transmission went down to almost zero. But when they actually gave them testosterone replacement, they completely restored the function of their dopamine system and their reward pathway. So it's kind of like having low testosterone kind of almost just shuts your brain down a little bit. It takes it down a few notches, and you're not communicating as well. And the way that you communicate is through these neurotransmitters. So it's like kind of, dampening down your brain function and communication. And then in terms of the anger thing, it doesn't appear that testosterone upregulates only a specific subset of neurotransmitters. It's basically all of those neural connections that you already have in place before you would, get on testosterone replacement. All of those neural connections that you have in place, it just increases the amplitude that they signal to one another. So if you're already a happy person at baseline, it kind of just increases your happiness and increases all that neural transmission. But if you're an angry person at baseline, which would, you can't really put a chemical cascade on that. It might be, increased adrenaline, what have you, but you'll simply just be, producing more adrenaline, and you'll have more receptors. So you'll be more sensitive to the adrenaline. So it's like, it doesn't actually increase anger or increase anything like that. It kind of just amplifies who you are already at baseline, and it just makes it stronger.
Wow, that makes so much sense.
Dude, this was one of the coolest things I found while I was researching this. I was so excited to put the podcast out there because I think someone, at least I hope a few people will pick it up and think that was awesome. So.
Hey everyone, Coach Taylor Milton here. Welcome to SkullbellzTV, the official YouTube channel of SupersetYourLife.com, where you're going to discover a weekly upload of quick and easy to follow workout tutorials featuring Coach Colt, myself, or one of our athletes to keep your workouts fun, practical, and effective. Our family's latest keto carnivore recipes that fuel Colt's competitions and keep myself and our kiddos strong and healthy. Video uploads of the SupersetYourLife.com podcast, now over 100 episodes. Your weekly dose of entertainment, education, and inspiration to fuel your life inside and beyond the gym, and much more. Last thing before we get into the video, we're asking a big favor from you. This has been working beautifully, so if you would please think of someone you care about that would benefit from this video, go ahead and smash that like button, click the share button, and text this video to them. That would mean the world to us. And while you're at it, make sure you hit the subscribe button. so you don't miss more exciting content from SkullbellzTV TV, because our team has lots of meat and lots of muscle coming your way, and I promise you won't want to miss it. When you hit the subscribe button, you'll see a bell icon pop up. You want to click that too, so you're notified every time we release a new video. Thank you so much for the support. It means the world to us. Every like, share, and subscription helps our channel grow and supports our family's hard work. So thank you so much for doing your part too. That's all we ask. God bless you, and please enjoy this video.
What I've noticed was when I'm in that higher range is just when I feel like mentally I'm banging on all cylinders and I don't feel overly aggressive or anything. When it gets low, when it has been low, I find that that's when, just like all those brain fog things that you said, but I'm really irritable and really, really angry, like real snappy when my testosterone gets that low. But I like the way that I feel like right now. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. I think it was around 600 or 700, which is pretty good. I'd like it to be higher, but whatever. We all gotta accept some things as we get into our 30s, right? But that's when I typically feel the most like myself, I guess. So that's really interesting that you explain it that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's definitely reasons why not eating enough would definitely, despite not only just the nutrients, you simply just might not be giving yourself all of the precursors to produce testosterone, but cortisol and glucagon and I believe ghrelin, actually, they all kind of stimulate the production of this specific peptide called neuropeptide Y, and this will actually feed back onto the actual neurons that are required. Sorry, I had to film outside today. It's a nice day out. But this neuropeptide Y actually feeds back onto what are called gonadotropin releasing hormones, the neurons for this hormone. And this is kind of the signal from the brain to actually start the production of testosterone. And this kind of feeds back and inhibits that neuron. So when you're in a state where you're producing a lot of cortisol and you're producing a lot of ghrelin because, obviously you're hungry, and glucagon is simply just a signal that you're probably burning body fat, then it'll actually increase the production of this kind of peptide. And again, it'll feed back and stop the production where it starts. So you'll basically shut down the entire system. And obviously it makes sense if you look at evolution. All of these things are, not pro growth at all. And that's what testosterone is. It really is just going to amplify your accrual of proteins and production of proteins and things like that. So at a period of time where, you have high ghrelin levels, so you're probably hungry, and you have glucagon, so you're actively catabolizing tissue, you're not going to want to promote trying to retain protein in muscles and things like that.
Right. Yeah. When your body feels like it's overly stressed and it gets into starvation mode, muscle typically is the first thing to go, which is why, like on a bodybuilding prep, the worst thing that you can do is just start eating less and moving more. And that's what any coach will tell you to do, because it works and because you'll lose weight. I mean, obviously that's just simple science, right? But to start a prep by putting yourself immediately into a state of stress, you're really shooting yourself in the foot long term. Best case scenario, you do this show, you look great, and then you come out of it and then you got a big rebound. That's just going to happen. I've seen people put on 30 pounds in 1 month after a show, because your body is so starved and it wants to put on anything, fat, muscle, it doesn't care. It just wants to blow up. And your ghrelin levels are going to be through the roof, and your cortisol is still going to be through the roof, because you did something to your body that it was never really meant to do. There's no other animal in nature that gets overweight by accident to the point to where it could actually seriously affect their health, right? Yet we, as a human species, think that we have it in our head that we need to limit how much we eat. No, we don't need to limit how much we eat. We need to eat the right foods. And then if we eat the right foods, then our body, based on our own biofeedback, will tell us how much to consume. And so best case scenario, you do the show and you do good, but you wreck your health. And worst case scenario, you don't even make it to the show because you wrecked your health before that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely, so I wrote an entire thesis paper for my senior year, specific program that I'm in, we required I think it was like a 3,000 to 4,000 word essay. So it wasn't crazy hard, but you could choose any topic. And I actually chose to write it on basically the evolutionary psychology of the dopamine system. And through researching that, I came across the idea that it really is the environment, the food environment that we put ourselves in, that is causing people to unconsciously overconsume. Obviously, no one's consuming food to want to overconsume. Like no one, most people, I can't speak for everyone, but most people don't want to, purposefully gain a lot of body fat. If they're trying to gain weight, obviously they're looking for muscle, but because of basically the modern food environment, we have obviously this molecule of dopamine in our brain that it doesn't really activate. It doesn't make us feel rewarded. It actually just increases our motivation to find rewards. And unfortunately, the food scientists at the big companies have actually found the specific, what they call the food matrix, that actually increases your dopamine levels the highest. And these are things like it's a food that has both sugar, fat, and salt in it. So it really isn't, fat that fat that is making us fat, or we can't say technically it's sugar that's making us fat. And obviously salt isn't making us fat, but the combination of those three things makes a food so easy to eat and so pleasurable that we just continue to come back to it, and we really don't have any satiation whatsoever. But they also take out all of the amino acids. So all, like, if you look at Doritos or something like that, they actually have very, very low protein levels, just by happenstance that you eat so much that you hit your protein requirements and get full. So they just make sure that they take down the protein as much as possible. And it's
Wow.
like they have scientists that are actually like doing this purposefully, obviously to maximize sales. And
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
obviously
for
it's not,
sure.
and it's probably not malicious or anything like that. They're just trying to do their job. But it's interesting that they actually have these scientists at these companies that are curating the foods that are basically in immediate access to all of us,
Mhm.
in a specific way that makes us kind of remember them a little bit more, and just makes them stick in our brains so that we'll go after them the next time.
I don't know. I don't know what the exact study is, or if this is even 100% true or not. But I heard that, and it sounds believable that there's scientists, just like you said, that work for chip companies that make the chip literally melt in your mouth, and so that you're finished with it, and so you have to pick another chip at a specific time, and it makes you go through the bag of chips faster. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. So I know that they add in specific, or they kind of curate the texture in a way that it does melt in your mouth, so it doesn't. And it also, the way that it melts, you do have some satiety mechanisms that are like, they're called volumetric satiety
Yeah.
mechanisms. So basically, you have receptors in your stomach that will actually stretch and signal to your brain that you're full. And this is how technically, like, eating a lot of vegetables at once, you can trigger this volumetric satiety, but it's not the nutrient sensing satiety that will typically last for much longer.
Right. And that's why
um
you feel confused. That's why your gut just feels like a wreck when you consume so much fiber at one point. It's just empty volume, and your stomach's like, what do I do with all this? We're full, but yet we're not full because we don't have the nutrients that we need.
yeah, and you have those nutrient sensors actually along your intestine that will sense that there are nutrients in food and relay that to your brain. So we even have, they found that you have glucose sensors in your stomach, and if you completely remove taste receptors, or like in a mouse, you completely remove their taste receptors, they still have the ability to pick the solution. So they either get water or a solution with glucose in it. And they can actually pick out the solution that has the glucose in it, even though they can't actually taste anything, because you have specific receptors that will actually increase the levels of, dopamine and rewarding chemicals in your brain. But this actually is at the level of the gut.
And that's why
Um,
they say I got a gut feeling. Yeah, you do, because because you have brain cells in your gut.
yeah. So what was, sorry, you said what was the study you thought you have read?
Oh yeah, it was just what you were saying. It was just there's people on staff that are getting paid to figure out how to make these products more addictable and more accessible and to make you eat more.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen one, or at least I've heard one of the guys who's been in this company, in like throughout these companies, say that I think for Doritos they actually change the amount of seasoning that they put on the chips. So like some chips will have extra seasoning and some chips won't have enough. And for some reason this triggers us to like never feel satiated or never feel satisfied. I think satisfied would be a better word to use it. So like
Mm-hmm.
if we eat a chip that's got a lot of seasoning on it and then we pick up a chip that doesn't have much seasoning on it, we're wired to want to keep eating until we find a chip that has a lot of seasoning on it. For some reason we can't end on something that's, technically lesser than what we experienced prior.
Oh
So we're
yeah,
always
that's a law of
trying to,
diminishing return. That just straight up sucks.
yeah, so it's like you're always trying to find the best chip. Like let's say the first chip you eat was the most flavorful, and all the rest of them after that don't have as much flavor. You're just gonna keep eating until you finally find a chip that's got a lot of flavor in it.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah, that one hit the spot. Now we're done.
unless you stop there, you're just gonna be like keep being in this rat race of trying to, find the chip that has the most seasoning on it and makes you feel technically like satisfied to leave.
Yeah. I've never been able to tell whether I'm really satisfied or whether my body is telling me that I need more food if carbohydrates are in my diet. If carbs are in my diet, it's game over. It could be a sweet potato, it could be an apple, it could be a potato chip. But if I'm consuming carbs, my body says, "Oh, I'm hungry. Feed me more. Feed me more. Feed me more." And now just the way that you explained about how those nutrient receptors, is that what you call nutrient receptors within your stomach lining? Those are telling you whether or not you're actually receiving the nutrients that you need. That makes so much sense because if you're not, then it doesn't matter how much you eat. Your body's going to keep telling you to eat more until it gets what it needs. And in my case, it's meat. If I'm eating uh, ground beef, eggs, chicken, pork products, fish, really any type of meat, um, it works, and my body tells me, okay, we're good, and I don't ever need to have carbs to have more energy in the gym or anything. And anytime I do, I just feel more tired and sluggish and inflamed, and I actually don't feel like going to the gym.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely those new weight loss medications, the GLP-1 agonists. The reason that they are used is because we have specific cells in our we have specific cells in our small intestine, or at least down the intestines. And at the top we have what are called K cells, and much lower down we have what are called L cells, and they produce different hormones. And the only way to actually activate the L cells is if the food that you eat isn't digested quickly enough, and it will actually make it all the way down your small intestine. Um, so most of the things that we're eating, like sugar and things like that, they're absorbed immediately into the top, the K cells, and they don't really ever really get in contact with those L cells. And the thing is that GLP-1 and basically a few other I'm not I can't actually name them off the top of my head, but a few other like appetite suppressing hormones are only produced inside of the L cells. So it's like you have to somehow bypass the quick absorption at the top of the small intestine and get to the bottom of the small intestine. And really, the only way to do that is to eat something like that's rich in amino acids, rich in fat can do this because it's a slower digesting, or you would have to eat something like a very complex carbohydrate that somehow is, not digested right at the top of your small intestine because most carbohydrates are digested there. Um, and the way that we control our blood sugar is much better, it seems like, in when something is slower digesting. But the only way you're going to promote this like kind of satiety is by eating something like a fat or a protein that will actually make it down all the way down the small intestine. And the only way that these sensors actually get turned on is by actually interacting with the nutrients. Like these cells interact with the nutrients and then start producing these hormones. So again, that's why the weight loss medications, the I think it's called Ozempic, one of the biggest things. They're using it for weight loss because it almost completely abolishes someone's appetite if they take too much of it. Um, and it's a physiological process that we have inside of our body that we can tap into. But most people eating things that are just digesting super quickly, where the reason you get hungry again really quickly is because there's not this process of digestion and actual like true satiety signaling. You're just kind of absorbing it really quickly, and then your brain is still hungry for the next meal.
Right. Hasn't even had time to catch up yet. Totally. What do you have any non-carnivore foods like plant but like cacao butter or like anything that's not animal based that you find works for your satiety signals?
Yeah, so I'd say the gelatin. That technically it's animal based.
Animal based, yeah.
Maybe the tiny bit of stevia technically doesn't count,
But like nuts or
uh,
anything?
um. So personally, I'm really for some reason I have an odd appetite for just protein itself. Like I could eat white fish all day long and have a blast. Like
Me
um.
too.
So I typically will. My diet consists of that gelatin, the eggs, and some sort of meat source. The only things that I add in, like I said, are the I add in things like lemons and limes actually. And I do that actually at the beginning of the meal just to help promote stomach acid,
Mhm.
like just the release of stomach acid. And this was an interesting study that I came across was that bitter foods can actually help with satiety. So for some reason, a lot of times, like I think it's something to do with the way that the bitter receptor communicates with your brain, but eating something bitter or having a bitter alongside a meal can actually increase your satiety from the meal. I'd have to look back at the study to actually give good details on that. But so eating like a lemon or a lime at the beginning of a meal not only helps with the stomach acid, but it kind of promotes like an earlier satiety for me at least.
Wow. Okay, so I
And
have
then
so the only food I've eaten today was communion, which is technically a carbohydrate. So I'm basically fasted. But I'm gonna try that though. So when I break my fast, I'm gonna do it with a little bit of lemon juice, probably like in yogurt or something. That's a pretty good combination. And then keto brick and probably chase it with a bowl of bone broth. That's a hack that I use for like whenever you do eat something that does increase your appetite. It's sweetened with stevia. It tastes bomb. It tastes like a candy bar, right? And so having just like even 8 ounces of bone broth afterwards, or like it could be ground beef out of the fridge, or just like anything really. It's like, oh, boom, and then and then it shuts off my appetite. So let me run this one by you. I think that the reason that happens is because it's not because when I would consume something that's sweetened with stevia, even like a sweetened BCAA beverage or something, and artificially sweetened like with sucralose. I've tested it; it doesn't knock me out of ketosis, and so I don't think that there's like an insulin response or anything. And so what I'm thinking is it's a dopamine response to where my brain chemically is just wanting more of that, um, and then consuming something that's animal based kind of shuts that off. Does that make sense?
no, definitely. I mean,
Okay.
I definitely couldn't give you a solid answer on that. But it would make sense that you have kind of that release. So the way that I've made sense of it is that the way that you really feel satiated is obviously through some different hormones, but also serotonin is seems to be a big part in that. And one thing that when you increase your levels of dopamine, it'll actually decrease your levels of serotonin just slightly. Um, so, and really, the only way to actually produce serotonin really is through actual nutrients. So it would make sense that you increase your dopamine levels a little bit with the artificial sweetener. And then I don't know if you've ever heard of the pleasure pain balance, but basically, you have a baseline pulse of dopamine. It's called your tonic dopamine. And every time that you feel what they call like a dopamine hit, it's when you basically the pulse rate actually just increases for a period of time. But every time that you increase your dopamine, there's a subsequent decrease that doesn't, so you don't come back to your baseline levels. You actually go below baseline for a period of time. And this is why something like addiction, where you have very high levels of dopamine, often leads to depression because you end up suppressing your dopamine so much, just trying to, it's basically like a balance, and you're just in this chronic state of low dopamine whenever you're not taking a drug or anything like that, because your body is simply trying to restore this pleasure pain balance. Um, so if you do something that increases your dopamine, you'll get a lower feeling. But what this actually triggers is like a craving. So you'll start craving to really anything else that would increase your dopamine. And on top of your mind, you've just, maybe you drank something with sweeteners in it.
Mhm.
So then you're now, that increased your dopamine. And then this puts you in a state of lower dopamine. And what's on your mind now is going to be consuming. So you're going to look for other foods or other things like that to try and raise your dopamine levels again. Um, it's kind of like, putting yourself in a more likely state to actually crave more food, if that makes any sense, because you gave yourself this, increased kind of reward sensation, but you didn't match it with the subsequent like satiety.
100%. When I got someone on my meal plan, my whole goal is to get them to stop eating carbs and to stop eating all this stuff that I know is damaging their body, right? So that they can they can eat what their body needs. My hesitation from having anybody, most people that come to us expect to go cold turkey and just quit everything, and that's why they hired a coach. So like, hey, I just need someone to help get me through this because especially if letting go of carbs is something that they're particularly concerned about, right? And that's what a coach is for. But any more, I'm really having to put myself in people's shoes and go, okay, how important are carbs to you? Like, what's your, if I said tomorrow you're done eating carbs and you're not having them for 30 days, what's your gut reaction to that? If they hesitate, I'm not pulling carbs out right away just because of what you described, because I know it's going to be tough on them. And it's and the way that you just explained about how the dopamine response works, now it all makes a lot more sense, because a lot of people just can't handle going cold turkey. And a lot of people really do need to make it a gradual transition, and that might look like kind of shifting towards paleo first, and so now we're cleaning up all your carb sources and having more fats, and then going from there to keto, and then letting the last few things go to make that gap to where you're pretty much meat based, with the exception of whatever you know for sure works for you and what doesn't work for you. Another thing on addictions, since we're talking about this, is I think that I've been experiencing that the last couple of weeks since cutting caffeine. Because I don't think I've had a single day without caffeine for several years now. But at my highest, it was around 500 milligrams to even as much as 1,000 milligrams a day. Not this competition season, but the one before that, just to be able to feel normal, like just to be able to be myself. And so I didn't realize how serious of an addiction it was until I did cut it cold turkey. And people weren't lying when they were saying that you're going to go through some serious withdrawal symptoms, and they're like, you're going to feel like a new person. And I was like, okay, we'll see. Like I've been through worse, whatever. I didn't realize what I was in for, man. Mornings were rough for a while. Feeling a lot better now, and seeing a lot more of the benefits of not having caffeine, like better muscle pumps, better sleep, better blood flow. So yeah, I can totally relate to everything you just said. That really brings things together, big picture now.
I think there, I mean, I've got so many comments on the caffeine thing. So, for some reason, you've hit on the two subjects that I really like. I've written things on and done a lot of research in.
I just read your mind, bro.
So, at least in terms of caffeine, there's a few different, pathways about kind of the caffeine addiction. So, definitely, I'm not sure the exact effects on your dopamine that caffeine has, but it does actually increase the amount of dopamine receptors that you have. So, it basically increases your sensitivity to dopamine, which in this way it could actually be a benefit. But there's definitely things like they found that giving people a lot of caffeine for just 7 days straight, they actually stop producing as much cortisol, which is actually one of the reasons that you feel, so awake and alert when you have caffeine. You actually start producing less cortisol, so you get less of the alerting signal from caffeine the longer that you're on it. But also, so the way that caffeine really, one of the bigger mechanisms with caffeine is it binds to what's called an adenosine receptor. And this is a receptor that typically binds a molecule of adenosine. And this is what makes you feel really, really tired. So adenosine is produced just as a byproduct of using energy. So ATP is actually converted into adenosine. So technically, the more energy that you're using, the more adenosine that you'll produce. And it'll bind to the receptor, and this causes you to feel like very tired. And at night, you'll have the most adenosine, and in the morning, you'll have the least. But what caffeine does is it binds to this receptor and doesn't let this communication happen. So it's basically just stopping that tiredness signal throughout the day. And then once the caffeine wears off, this is why you get the crash, because you've accumulated all this adenosine and it'll quickly bind to the receptor, and you'll get like this mid-afternoon crash and start feeling sleepy.
Yeah, dude, because without caffeine, the mornings suck, man. Like they really, really suck. Like they haven't in a long time. But then I'll find myself super productive and motivated the rest of the day, and I have all this energy that I didn't used to have back to when I did used to have caffeine in the mornings.
Yeah, so that's why your energy is probably going to be much more stable. So you don't have this adenosine kind of accumulating in the background. So sorry, you still have the adenosine, but it gradually accumulates throughout the day like it normally would, instead of this caffeine blocking the adenosine, and then just
Okay.
randomly when the caffeine wears off, all these adenosine receptors are now open, and you have all this adenosine that's actually accumulated. So you might not technically be more tired in the afternoon, but it feels much worse because it's this massive crash of, all this adenosine binding to the receptor at one time, because the caffeine is metabolizing and wearing off. And then the way that your brain actually adapts to caffeine, so the reason that you keep having to use more is because without this signaling, you'll actually begin to create more adenosine receptors. So let's say at baseline you have 100 receptors, and caffeine binds to all the receptors. Like 200 milligrams of caffeine would bind to all the receptors. What your body does, because it's so amazing, is it will increase the number of adenosine receptors in your on your brain. So maybe you'll have 150 now, and 50 of those receptors can now be taken up by the adenosine molecule. So now you'll be getting the promoting signal of adenosine on your sleep, at the same time that caffeine is trying to inhibit it, because you're actually upregulating the amount of available receptors to for the adenosine to bind to. And then once you completely omit the caffeine, you'll still have a lot more adenosine receptors. So you'll basically have upregulated your sensitivity to this adenosine molecule. So in the morning or throughout the day, you'll probably just have a stronger satiety signal coming in because you have more receptors, and the more receptors you have, the easier it is for them to be bound to. So basically, caffeine, when you're drinking caffeine, it's um, upregulating this process, but you probably won't notice it because you're masking it with the caffeine. But once you completely take the caffeine out, you'll have almost like a enhanced ability to feel tired because you have more of these tiredness receptors in your brain.
Yeah, it's like I'm super sluggish first thing in the morning because I don't have that kick and that motivation to go crush a workout. Halfway through the workout, I noticed that my performance is better because my coaches had always actually tried to get me off of caffeine. They were like, "You'll have a better workout without caffeine," and I was like, "I can't even imagine working out without caffeine." And so now what I'm noticing is better blood flow, better pumps. I feel stronger, and I just have an overall better sense of well-being and less anxiety throughout the day.
Yeah, my sense about my thoughts around at least the morning tiredness is actually, so a lot of times they tell you not to drink caffeine immediately in the morning because you'll still have some of this adenosine floating around.
Hmm.
So it gets flushed out during the night, but your brain isn't on this perfect rhythm like you are. So there might be some residual adenosine left over. But then again, because you've been drinking caffeine for so long, you have more of these receptors. There's going to be a lot more to flush out. So the likelihood that there's going to be still a little adenosine left when you wake up immediately in the morning is probably much higher because you were drinking a lot of caffeine beforehand. Um, so this morning tiredness is likely because you just haven't completely flushed out all the adenosine. So you still have this kind of this background signal, background noise of kind of promoting sleep. And then once that is completely flushed out, you'll get the energy that you're talking about and feel, extremely energized for the rest of the day. And then, you'll slowly accumulate the adenosine naturally, so you won't feel any dips in energy. And then at the end of the night, you'll have high levels of adenosine, and you'll fall right to sleep.
That makes so much more sense now. Yeah, because then there's um because the mornings are basically just like you described, and then when it gets up to late at night, like I'll be I'll be writing workout plans still, and then I'll go out into the shop and be packaging up orders and making deltoid destillators, which is our skull cable attachment, and then I'm like coming back inside to kiss the kids goodnight, and then my wife and kids are all already asleep. I'm like, what the heck? It's 10 o'clock at night. Wow, where did that time go? And then the morning, it's like, oh, here we go again. So, but I've noticed a trend upward in the right direction though, and so I guess what you're saying is that that's to be temporary, because I just haven't fully made that transition yet. I guess I should tell you I was also going from about 300 milligrams a day, eventually down to the last couple of weeks we're at 200 milligrams. Then I was like, enough of this garbage. I'm just gonna go straight from 200 to zero.
Yeah, so I'm not. I get then. I can't give you definite answers, but it does sound like it's kind of just a slower recovery process because of overusing caffeine for so long. It's kind of like Robert robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like the
Yeah.
price that what you were doing yesterday is now going to cause this impact today that you're just trying to kind of recover from. Same thing with that whole dopamine system is
Mm-hmm.
your brain will actually upregulate, certain things so that when you're in this state of very high dopamine, you'll um, you'll actually downregulate the amount of dopamine receptors you have. So high dopamine causes you to downregulate the receptors. So even though you have high dopamine, you're technically not going to be sensing it as much. And again, this is just a physiological response to try and find homeostasis in something that's non-physiological. And caffeine itself is not something that we've ever really had to deal with. So it's kind of like a response to get back to what is technically normalcy when you're drinking a ton of caffeine by increasing this you know because caffeine is only increasing your wakefulness. The body has a reactive response to increase your ability to feel tired so you can get to sleep on time. And then once you pull out that kind of, I guess, fake um, wakefulness chemical being caffeine, then you still have to deal with this extra tiredness signal that you have that you've kind of built up. So it's just a process of letting your body, because now you're probably going to be in a state that's, abnormally tired. So for a period of time, you'll be in that, and then your body will respond by getting back to normal again, if that makes any sense.
Wow, that does make a ton of sense. Dude, I so respect your time, and I really want to wrap this up for that reason. But one more thing I got for you too. I experienced a lot of water retention. What do you think could have been the cause of that
From caffeine
from cutting
or
caffeine?
from,
So yeah,
oh, I
when I
could not
yeah,
tell you.
well, okay, because my theory is that it's a diuretic, right? And so
I was going to say that is just the diuretic effect of caffeine. I'm not sure if you've built up if it's a thing, but you may have somehow built up an enhanced ability to retain water to maintain normal fluid balance because of all the caffeine you're drinking. So it kind of stopped having that diuretic effect. And then once you pulled it out, you continue to. This is the same reason that you would do something like water loading, where you drink a lot of water, and then like for 2 days you might drink 2 gallons of water, and then on day three you'd only drink a gallon. But because your body's still expecting to intake the 2 gallons, you'll basically urinate out about 2 gallons of water, or what you would normally urinate if you're drinking a lot of water. And this is how people get or like a natural diuretic effect, because they excrete more water than they're actually taking in, because their body is expecting to have more water intake. So this might be
You,
just kind of
you, you just explained my peaking protocol for bodybuilders. That's
yeah, I did
why I
that.
do
I
it.
did
Yeah,
that with one.
you just
I did that with
pound
one of
water
my
like
friends.
crazy and then stop, and then you just keep peeing because your body hasn't figured it out yet. And you got about
Absolutely.
24 hours where your abs look great.
Yeah, I did that with one of my friends to get a picture for his before and after picture. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, we're gonna do, and I made it sound really cool. I was like, we're gonna do a water load. So he was drinking about 1.5 gallons of water for 2 days straight. Or actually, I think for him, he really enjoyed it for some reason. So I think he did it for 3 or 4 days straight, and then we pulled back his water, and I think he ended up losing like maybe 5 to 7 pounds in the just over the span of that day, because he just kept urinating out what his body was expecting, and he wasn't giving it to his body. So he lost a lot of water weight, and that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, that's how you do
Like,
it.
because you're drinking so much caffeine, your body kind of just learned how to retain more water in order to not get dehydrated from all the caffeine, and then you ended up pulling out the caffeine, and your body was still expecting this, you know, dehydration to be caused by the caffeine all day. And since you no longer have that, you're still kind of holding on to water for a period of time. And has it worn off?
Um, let's see. No, I'm still. Let's see. I went from when I cut caffeine, I think I was about 204, 205, and I jumped all the way up to 208 when I after I cut, and I'm back down now to I think this morning I was 206. So I think it's headed in the right direction. And my macros have all been basically the same, because I don't want to titrate them down too quickly, because I don't want a stress response. And also, cutting caffeine has been a bit tougher than I thought it would be. So the last thing my body needs is any additional stressors on top of moving and on top of other life stressors. Right? We all have them. And so anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is nothing has changed in my diet to cause me to really need to signal muscle burning or excuse me, muscle building or fat storage. So it was definitely water weight.
Yeah, I mean, and it could definitely be just, you have almost like some built up anxiety about the next day, knowing that, because you kind of know that you're going to have this very kind of groggy morning. So it could just be some built up anxiety causing you to produce a little extra cortisol, and
That too.
increase your water retention, just because you're kind of like, oh man, I have to suffer through this hour long period in the morning where I feel like death, and then for the rest of the day I'm great. So it could just be, even like, especially right before bed, thinking about the next morning, you might be like, oh man, this is gonna be bad, and which is just increases your cortisol a little bit, and will cause that, fluid retention that's typically correlated with that.
Mm-hmm. That makes a
And I
lot of
mean,
sense.
and the only other thing is, I wouldn't say that you're gaining fat or anything, but it could just be, without the caffeine, you might have a small decrease in your caloric expenditure, just because you don't have as much energy. Maybe your neat's going down, you're just not fidgeting as much. But, that again, the 2 pounds is really, it sounds like just probably water weight from maybe some increased stress. And obviously, there's a ton of other factors that could be contributing to it. So,
Yeah, good stuff, man. Have you ever heard the saying, drinking caffeine is robbing tomorrow's energy for today?
yeah, absolutely. And it really, I would say, um, especially if you get in what I call the caffeine sandwich, is where you drink. So like, you wake up in the morning and you feel terrible, so you drink a lot of caffeine, and then you get that afternoon crash, so you drink some more caffeine, and then this impacts your sleep, so you don't sleep as well, and then the next morning you wake up and you feel even more tired because you didn't get sleep. So then you decide to drink more caffeine, and it kind of is this cycle of getting less sleep and having to drink more caffeine. So really, a lot of times, and it's something that's so, normal to everyone, like just drinking caffeine. So it oftentimes, you don't really realize how much you're drinking until you like actually look at it. Like, I've had times where I just like unconsciously have increased the amount of coffee I was drinking just because I mean, sometimes it's just because I like the flavor of coffee a little bit. But so it's like an unconscious thing, but at some point you may look at it and be like, wow, I've been drinking 300 milligrams of caffeine for the last month. So you try and, come down from that. And there is a process of trying to, you basically built up that your new normal is 300 milligrams of caffeine. And if it's impacting your sleep and basically impacting all your circadian functions, then when you pull it out, not only are you going to have this increased tiredness signal, but if you're getting poor sleep and masking it with caffeine, now you can't mask it with caffeine anymore. So you'll see that, oh, I'm also getting 6 hours of sleep now. So I would say one of the best ways to get off of caffeine is to try and just, like, let's say you're drinking a cup of coffee in the morning and a cup of coffee in the afternoon. Just slowly, you can even drink the exact same amount, but taking that coffee from noon and putting it in the morning. So making the time that you stop caffeine much earlier, much earlier. So trying to inhibit it from impacting your sleep. And then gradually, once you've gotten it down to like, all your caffeine at one time, then from there, you'll start reducing the amount of caffeine. And try and do this alongside making sure that you're getting more and more sleep. So just as like dial in your sleep, and then at that point you can really try and just pull down the amount of caffeine that you're taking in.
Wow. Where were you 3 weeks ago when I needed you?
No, I'm sure you've got your coach. I bet he's got you dialed in.
You're looking at you're looking at my coach. No, I would say that most of my clients are my coaches. Man, I learn more from them than I do from anybody else. It was actually
Yeah, certainly. Like,
yeah, Jordan's been on our show a couple of times, and she's been actually really helping me with the caffeine thing too, because she's cutting it too.
yeah, and I think I've gotten inspiration from people that I work with to like look into things deeper.
Yeah,
Like they come with a problem and it's like, oh, this is actually pretty interesting. Like it's not something that applies to my life, but it might apply to your life. Like I think the best example is my mom actually. So she was having just a difficult time getting in the amount of steps that she needed every day. Because I recommended to get her or for her to get 10,000 because it's kind of a reasonable goal for her. And I realized just kind of looking into all the different times that we spend kind of doing nothing and all the ways that you can increase your step count and get more activity while also getting stuff done. So
100%.
like I have her, so she doesn't go to the gym at all, just because she doesn't have a membership and she really isn't all too interested in getting one. But I have her every morning or every day actually accumulate little what I call micro workouts. So she
Oh,
has a
good for
goal at
you.
the end of she has a goal at the end of the day of getting like 50 push-ups, a certain amount of lunges, a certain amount of squats, and she can do it in however she wants. She can do, you know, two push-ups every 30 minutes and accumulate it throughout the day.
That's a lot more natural to the human body for it to operate that way instead of going to the gym. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So she can get like, maybe five push-ups whenever she has time, or so I have her, any time that she's just kind of sitting there, maybe between emails at work, she's waiting for a response or something. I was like, yeah, just get up and, take a few steps or do something like that.
Mind Pump had a good episode on that not too long ago. They were talking about studies basically saying that even if they like German volume training, just because it's a really simple example, right? 10 sets of 10, and that could be bench press, it could be squats, whatever. They've done studies where there's no difference in muscle growth between whether you do them all within a certain period of time, or if you do one set and then an hour later do another set and then an hour later do another set. It doesn't really your rest times have much less to do with the fact that you just did that exercise X number of times throughout the day.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure the exact. That's something that I want to look into and start, doing some more research and maybe film some podcasts on. But definitely, like, just the idea of getting blood flow throughout the entire day. So, like, let's say a lot of times I actually recommend to people to do like an upper body exercise followed by a lower body exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for someone that's not like extremely interested in like maximizing every ounce of hypertrophy, but doing something upper body and then lower body, because you'll basically, let's say you're working out your chest, you'll shunt blood into your chest and there will be more blood there. And then once you go to your lower body, you have to shunt more blood down to your lower body. And this actually takes energy, and it's not, it's not crazy. You're not going to burn an extra 1,000 calories, but just the process of getting blood from, the top of your body to your, your lower limbs. It takes a little bit of extra energy. And let's say you're sitting all day, just briefly getting up and doing maybe like a leg workout where you have to push blood into your legs, and then doing something that's for your upper body where you'll push blood into your upper body. Not only are you improving your circulation in general, so you're gonna be increasing the waste product removal from muscle cells, but you're also just going to be it's like a tiny increase in your metabolism and increase in your blood flow, and it has downstream effects of really just improving your overall blood flow and have that tiny metabolic boost.
Brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Dude, like I said, I respect your time, and more so than that, I respect your mom's time too. And I know that you guys have some plans today, and my wife is also a mother, obviously, and so
Absolutely, man.
much as I hated booking this on Mother's Day and didn't even realize that I did when we put it in our calendars a couple days ago. I think we should spend some time with them.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it until I think this Friday when I was looking at the calendar, and Google Calendar has Mother's Day in it, and I was like, oh god.
I know. I heard it on the radio early last week, and I was like, crap, I totally have meetings that day.
Yeah, I mean, so unfortunately, one of the weird things about me is like I have an odd ability to remember things about like nutrition and stuff like that, but my like memory for dates and directions.
Dude, okay, you are definitely talking to the same person, just on the other side of the United States, man. Yeah,
absolutely.
that's
like,
me.
like I couldn't back out of my driveway without a GPS. It's pretty bad. So
Yeah.
I think it kind of just shows that I really definitely am interested in the topic of health and nutrition. So
Bro,
that's
okay,
really where my passion's at.
so are you the kind of guy to where it's like when you focus on something, just like you forget about everything else in your peripheral, and there could be like an emergency happening, and unless someone comes and says, "Look, there's an emergency," you're just like so buried in your own work that is that
Yeah, it's
how your brain operates?
it's kind of like the I don't know if you've ever looked into the research on flow, where it's like it's almost like losing your sense of time, like your perception of time.
Yeah.
And you get a task done with such like accuracy, and you don't even realize, like, you just go through the movements almost naturally. I think I
You're
get
just
that
in
a lot
such
of
a state
times.
of flow in the zone.
Yeah, and I get that a lot of times when I'm writing and when I'm like trying to learn something new. It'll be like just this random flush of finally putting everything together, and I'll kind of get into like this state where I'm synthesizing content and putting it into simpler terms, and then I'll look back on it and I'll be like, I didn't even remember writing that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's great information. I'll use it. So
Yeah, you just get
I think
ideas
I
that
get
start
into
coming out
that
of
state.
nowhere, and you got to capitalize
Yeah,
on those, because if you don't write them down, they're gone forever.
yeah, and I think I get into that state a lot. So and I mean, it's definitely I think a neurochemical thing too, because luckily no one in my family really has any issues with like ADHD or anything like that. And I think that's one of the big things where the reason people get ADHD is because they simply like can't focus their attention on a single thing. And I think I have a really good ability to dial in on one thing, and unfortunately, sometimes that means blocking out everything else. So sometimes I need someone to snap me out of it, but I think
Yeah, bro,
that's one thing that
that's what my wife is for. She brings me back to reality when I get too far into a project.
yeah, like in school, I'll actually put on. I'm way too into this sometimes. Like I'll put on specific what are called binaural beats, and it puts your brain in, basically it kind of sets up your brain to basically be in a specific brainwave state that influences your ability to get into this flow state. So sometimes when I'm writing, I'll actually put in these binaural beats, and
Is it
I
like
can go
is it
through an
like a
entire.
playlist or what?
No, it literally is like a 2-hour soundtrack of just it's not like pleasant music. It's not something you'd listen to with your friends.
Yeah, no, cause
Um,
I know what you're talking about. I do the same thing. It's just like it's just background noise. It's not even music. There's like maybe like some birds or something in it sometimes, and it's just kind of like a
yeah,
weird like Zen kind of like meditation flow. But it gets you so focused and in the zone though. Yeah.
yeah, and that's how I do basically. Whenever I'm trying to do a big project for writing, I just go on YouTube and I look up like slow binaural beats, and I think if you're looking for it, the one has like a pink cover or something like that. It's like 2 hours long. And I click on it
We're
and
probably listening to the same one actually.
yeah, absolutely. And I get into the zone, and that's where um, really all of my big publications or writings have come from. Was
Yeah.
like I can remember specific days where I was in school with this like soundtrack in, and probably wrote between 2 and 3 thousand words just in about an hour and a half. Like it just kept going like that.
Mhm. For children that struggle with autism, a lot of times what they'll recommend or prescribe is headphones that basically just have that playing, and so when they get dysregulated or just kind of out of their own head, it kind of brings them back to a state to where they can focus on just simple day-to-day things.
Yeah, interestingly, for something like ADHD, all the medications actually increase your levels of dopamine. Because it's almost like dopamine can kind of increase your ability to find a reward in the environment. So it gives you that motivation to like look for it. So when you have an increased level of dopamine, it seems like you can really find that reward and focus in on it much better than if you had lower dopamine. Because it's almost like dopamine kind of is telling your brain what is and isn't important to focus on. And if you don't really have any of this transduction, you're not going to find value in anything. So then everything becomes appealing because there's not a specific thing that you're focused on. So it's kind of like um, you can't really coordinate what is important to invest energy in and what isn't. So you might start writing and then start thinking about video games and start thinking about something else just because you know. And I'm not sure how practical this is for most people, but trying to do things that would increase your dopamine levels could definitely help.
Wow.
All right, well, it looks like my dad is coming home, so it might be a little bit loud. So I'll definitely
Yeah,
have to
bro,
let you
I'll
go.
let you go, man. Hey, for whatever it's worth, tell both of your parents that Colt Milton is proud of you. Wow. Yeah, everybody listening, make sure you follow this guy, support everything he does. Where can people go to find you, bro?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Calvin_Scheller. I have my podcast. It's very intelligently named the Calvin Scheller Podcast, so it should be pretty easy to find. And yeah, really all my social medias are just going to be my name. And then I think my YouTube is just Calvin Scheller. So I'm posting everywhere on there, and I'm as active as possible. If you DM me or message me, put a comment in the comment section, I'll respond to absolutely everything. And I guess if for some reason email is your best bet, it's just my name at gmail.com. So I'd love for everyone to reach out to me.
Oh,
I'm
heck
trying
yeah.
to help as many people as possible, and I've got a pretty open schedule at this point with being a high schooler. So if you want to reach out and want some help, I'd love to help.
That's amazing, bro. I wish you all the success in the world. I'm praying for you big time on that, man. Seriously. All right, I'm totally in your corner. Let's make this a regular thing. You are welcome back on this show anytime, okay?
Absolutely, I'll get you on my show. Let's do next weekend if you have time.
I definitely don't have time next weekend because we'll be moving that weekend.
Yeah,
As soon as we get back in, you're the first guy on my calendar. Okay, I'm coming on your show for sure. You got it. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again for this entire episode. If you found this helpful or entertaining, which I am sure that you did, please shoot this over to a friend because this is a very, very powerful testimony that really needs to be told. I think this can bring hope to a lot of people that are struggling in their health journeys. As of this week, Jonathan Griffiths from the UK, Mark Ennis from Ireland, and I have all launched a new podcast called Carnivore Coach's Corner. If you haven't heard about that one already, this is a collaboration in which two other primal nutrition, lifestyle, and bodybuilding coaches who have much more experience and credentials than I do meet weekly to discuss frequently asked questions from our own one-on-one consultations, discuss trending topics in the carnivore space, and coach each other on our own journeys as competitive athletes. We've been going live on YouTube for a few months now and are 3 episodes into the new show. You can find us by searching Carnivore Coaches Corner on Spotify. We're going to be on other platforms too, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to get those uploaded. So we are working on the other platforms too, Apple in particular. Don't worry. Email your questions to admin@supersetyourlife.com to hear your question answered at our next session. That's it. Thanks everybody again so much for joining. God bless. We'll catch you on the next episode.